Okay, let's keep reading Zack Power Undercover. We are up to chapter 4. The lift doors opened at level 27, where Leon's office in the Advanced Research Lab was located. Leon and Zack had to swipe their ID cards and submit to security checks before they could even leave the lift. Leon, as soon as we get to your office, I'll need to access the GIB agent database, said Zack, as he held his head in front of the security scanner. A red laser flashed over his face, and then a green light blinked. I want to run background checks on any GIB agents that have been acting weirdly lately. That sounds good, said Leon, because I'd like to run some tests on the FF matrix. Zack followed Leon into his lab and sat down at Leon's workstation. As Leon worked on a tangle of wires and tiny electronic parts, Zack logged onto the agent database. If I were a mole, thought Zack, where would I hide at GIB? He printed out a list of the items stolen from the Advanced Research Lab and began running searches through the database. Next, Zack clicked through the files of hundreds of GIB agents. He cross-checked security reports looking for clues and gradually built up a short list of suspects to investigate. Finally, thought Zack, it's time to go mole hunting. He checked his watch. Hey, Leon, Zack called across the lab. I'm ready to start moving. Leon looked up from his work. Just give me a couple more minutes. I couldn't find my final version of the FF matrix, so I had to rig another one up from scratch. Leon came over to where Zack was working. What have you found out? He whispered. Well, I have 2 prime suspects, said Zack in a low voice, checking over his shoulder that no one was listening. The first is a guy called Agent Checkmate. Apparently GIB have been tailing him for 2 months because he was spotted secretly meeting with BIG's knife-fighting expert, Switchblade. It's possible Switchblade bribed Checkmate to become a double agent. And suspect number 2? Asked Leon, carefully snipping some wires. A guy called Agent Testtube, said Zack. He works here in the Advanced Research Lab. Could have stolen the equipment. Interesting, said Leon thoughtfully. I really like Testtube, but he does get teased for being a crazy scientist. Exactly, said Zack. Maybe he's fed up with it. The teasing has gotten worse lately because he's been working on a gadget called the Intelligent Jerry Corrosive Acid Bomb. Zack leant over the lab bench, thinking hard. Speaking of crazy gadgets, he said, what are the Scav Mod and Terror Stick? They're on the list of stolen inventions, but I've never heard of them. That's because they're brand new, said Leon. The mole stole our prototypes. The Scav Mod is a microcomputer designed to crack passwords. It can hack into a network and transmit files for storage to Terror Stick, which is the most powerful memory stick ever created. The 2 gadgets can be disguised together as any small everyday item, like a piece of fruit or an asthma pump. For the first time that day, Zack suddenly felt nervous. That means the mole has everything he needs to steal all of GIB's most valuable secrets during the global backup, he realised, and the identity of every GIB spy could be made public. The Terror Stick. As if he could read Zack's thoughts, Leon nodded and said, the mole has everything he needs to destroy GIB. Chapter 5. Leon stood up and stretched. That should do it for the FF matrix, he said. Let's get you rigged up. Zack stood still as Leon carefully stuck a tiny chip underneath his shirt. Thanks, Leon, he said. I'm going to check on Agent Checkmate first. Database security tracking says that he's down in the weapons testing and combat training zone on level 10. I'll try and get him talking while we practice and see if he lets anything slip. Be careful, Zack, said Leon. The hologram will look solid, but if you come into contact with anything, it'll distort. Checkmate will know at once that you're in disguise. Not if I can help it, thought Zack. He and Leon headed out of the lab toward the lift. Once they got there, they had to go through all the security checks again. I know GIB can't take any chances with security if there's a mole on the loose, thought Zack, but this is becoming a major hassle. He checked his watch, feeling impatient. Eventually, the lights flashed green and the lift doors opened. Leon and Zack ducked into the level 10 toilets. You should turn on the FF matrix now, said Leon. You can control it with your spy pad. I've loaded the identities of every GIB agent who matches your height. Who do you want to look like? Zack racked his brains. I need to look like someone Checkmate has met before, he thought, but not someone he knows too well. I know, said Zack. Agent Lockpick. That guy who lives on junk food, said Leon, raising an eyebrow. Yep, said Zack. I had pizza once with Lockpick and Checkmate, just after we graduated from Spy Academy. Agent Lockpick never stops talking, which is great because I'll need to ask Checkmate lots of questions. Good thinking, Leon said. Zack grinned and punched in the selection into the appearance menu on his spy pad. He then selected the tracksuit function. As soon as he hit the enter key, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stick. Back of his neck stick up. No? Leon beamed. Zack looked at himself in the mirror and gasped. Zack's face and body looked bigger. His hair was darker and longer, and now he was wearing a tracksuit. He looked exactly like Lockpick. Zack lifted his hand in amazement and watched as the hologram of Lockpick did the same in the mirror. It works by moulding the hologram to your skin with static electricity, Leon explained proudly. That's how it simulates natural movement. Nice work, Leon, Zack said, still staring at himself in the mirror. I don't know Lockpick, so I'll wait for you back at the lab, said Leon. Zack, be careful. If Checkmate is the mole and he realizes you're onto him, he might get desperate. Don't worry, said Zack, finally turning away from his reflection. I'm not taking any chances in the weapons testing and combat training zone. Zack left the toilets and walked carefully down the hallway, trying to remember how Lockpick moved. The FF Matrix could only change his appearance so much. I'll have to be careful about how I speak too, Zack realised. The FF Matrix can't change my voice. Zack stopped in front of the steel door of the training zone. He swiped his ID card and pushed it open. The walls of the huge room were lined with complex equipment. There was a target range in one corner and a weapons locker opposite. The floor was covered with mats for practicing martial arts. This has to be the coolest room at GIB HQ, Zack thought to himself. I've got to come back here sometime. Zack caught sight of Agent Checkmate over at the Metal Fist robotic boxing machine and headed in his direction. Luckily, they seemed to be the only two people in the entire training zone. Hey, Checkmate, called Zack in a slightly higher voice. Hey, replied Agent Checkmate. He stepped back from the Metal Fist and wiped away some sweat. How are you, Lockpick? Zack interrupted. We had pizza one night with Rockstar, remember? Oh, right, Checkmate said with a nod. Let me think. You were medium Hawaiian with triple pineapple, right? And Rockstar had spicy beef Mexicana with extra corn chips and sour cream. Impressive, said Zack. I'm not good with faces, but I never forget a pizza, Checkmate laughed, turning back to the boxing machine and raising his fists. I've got to keep him talking, thought Zack quickly. I need to turn the conversation to Switchblade. So Checkmate, said Zack as he stretched out his leg on a mat. What do you do when you're not training? Hang out with friends? Yeah, I guess, puffed Checkmate, ducking a power punch from the Metal Fist and hitting back. But I have a lot of homework too. Zack nodded. I always find that only other spies can really understand how we're too busy for homework, he said, trying to sound chatty. Are you friends with any other agents? Checkmate paused for a minute. There were beads of sweat running down his face. He turned to Zack with an eyebrow raised. Why do you want to know? Zack shrugged, trying to look bored, but before he could reply, splat! Huge globs of green goo was suddenly flying through the air. One of them had landed on Checkmate's face. The sticky slime started to harden as it oozed over the agent's mouth and nose. Checkmate! Zack yelled, scrambling towards him. But the agent's face was already turning blue. With his nose and mouth sealed shut, Checkmate couldn't breathe. Zack watched in horror as Checkmate collapsed on the floor.